brief video, I'm going to go over the questions, the multiple choice questions for exam 1 for EDU 250. So question 1 under IDEA, which child is probably not entitled to receive a public education? The correct answer was all these children are entitled to a public education. So remember, it does not matter how severe a disability is, that every child is under the IDEA entitled to a free and appropriate public education, FAPE. Question 2, full-time placement in a regular ed classroom. Remember with the IDEA that this always needs to be considered first. So when the IEP team is making a decision as to what supports and services a child needs, that conversation should always start with, if this child is in a general ed environment, what supports and services could be provided for them to be making success? And if the IEP team then decides that there is no configuration that would work in general ed, then they would proceed to having conversations about a more restrictive environment. Question 3, which of the following continuum of service options for students with learning disabilities is in correct ascending order in terms of levels and supports? So based on what I just said, we're always going to start with the regular classroom. If that with supports and services does not seem like it will be effective, the team then will consider resource room support. And if resource room support does not seem like the student could make effective progress, then the very last thing we would talk about is a separate classroom or even a separate school. That is often called a continuum. Question 4, in most states, when a teacher initially experiences a child who is experiencing learning or behavior difficulties that's not already receiving special ed, the first step that is recommended is, so the first thing that should happen is through general ed, there should be some development and implementation of interventions over a reasonable period of time. In many schools, you'll hear that referred to as tiered intervention or multi-tiered systems of support, MTSS. If after those tried interventions over that period of time are not working, then you may want to proceed to a referral for special ed eligibility. Remember that we have to suspect that there is a disability. So doing those interventions through general ed sometimes can help us tease out a little bit, is this but is this a behavioral issue, which is not necessarily a disability, or perhaps are we looking at a disability? Question 5. The least restrictive environment for any given student receiving special education services is, remember I talked about the continuum in a previous question? So it can really change over time. It needs to be as close to a general ed setting as that child can make effective progress with appropriate supports and services. So it's whatever's closest to general ed with supports and services. It's, again, that continuum of supports. Question 6. The learning category of disability is, the federal category of disability in which has the largest number of identified students. 7, according to the law, an IEP should be reviewed at minimum annually, and a reevaluation should be done every 3 years. That's not in the question. That was just bonus fact. Question 8, special ed is individualized assessment, goal-directed instruction, and specialized instruction. So it is all of these things. Remember in what the steps of an IEP, assessment is one of them. There are goals that are developed in that individual education plan, and specialized instruction is provided to achieve those goals. Question 9, Section 504 provides accommodation. Is a special ed law, is federally funded. You will note that there may have been an error. Hi, I am going to go over exam 1 for EDU 250, the multiple choice questions. So question 1, under IDEA, which child is probably not entitled to receive public education? The answer to that is none. That a child, regardless of how severe their disability is entitled to receive a free and appropriate public education. Question 2, full-time placement in a regular classroom is always the first thing that should be considered by an IEP team with appropriate supports and services. And there are more questions attached to that one. Keep in mind that idea of a continuum of services. Question 3, which of the following continuum of services options for students with learning disabilities is in correct ascending order in terms of level of support? That would be, like I had just said, start with the regular classroom. We would then consider a resource room. If resource room did not seem like that would be effective for that child, then and only then will we consider anything as restrictive as a separate classroom. So remember, we always start with a regular classroom with appropriate supports and services. Question 4, in most states, when a teacher initially experiences a child who's experiencing learning or behavior difficulties that's not already receiving special ed, the first step recommended or mandated is, and that's developing and implementing an intervention. In many school systems, this is referred to as tiered intervention or a multi-tiered system of support. So that is through general education, trying over a period of time and collecting data, interventions with the student, and that will help us determine if the child is responding to that. Sometimes it's called response to intervention or RTI. Then we would not proceed with a referral to special ed because the interventions through general ed are being effective. That being said, there are some students that we would proceed directly to a referral, and that's if there is a very, very strong sense that the child has a disability, or if a parent makes a request for a referral. We can't tell them, no, we have to do these interventions first. If a parent requests a referral, then a team needs to meet to consider that referral. The LRE for any given student receiving special education services, the answer to that is it really can change over time. So in a previous question, I talked about the continuum. So remember, the child's placement is as close to the regular ed setting that meets that child's special education needs, which can change. The category of learning disability is the largest category of disability and has the most identified individuals. According to the law, an IEP should be reviewed annually. Also keep in mind that every 3 years, a child should be reassessed. Special education is, and the correct answer to that is all of the above, because it is individualized assessment and planning, goal-directed instruction, and specialized instruction. Think of the 6 tenets of IDEA, and you'll see that it does have that assessment. We have IEPs that have goals, and then we provide specialized instruction. Section 504 is through the Rehab Act, and that is not a special education law. It is a civil rights law that provides accommodations to students in the general curriculum. True or false, a 504 plan is automatically developed if the student does not qualify for an IEP, and the correct answer to that is false. A 504 plan should be considered when somebody has a disability that impacts a major life function and requires accommodations to, I would say, level the playing field. So we should never think of 504 plans as a consolation prize for not receiving an IEP. And if no disability is determined, then a student would not qualify for a 504 either. Research findings indicate the reasons many diverse students fare poorly in school include, and the answer to that is all of these: disengagement, alienation, dropping out, little or no access to high quality preschool, and inferior schools. All of those are reasons why a student could be doing poorly in school. Question 12, ADHD can be effectively managed and treated for some students with medication or with systematic instruction and/or accommodations and modifications. So some students may be on medication. That is not the school's purview. That is a medical issue, but we can provide systematic instruction and accommodations in modifications, and sometimes it is a combination of both that is most effective. Question 13, which of the following are effective strategies for teaching and learning for students with disabilities? So providing high structure and clear expectations and capitalizing on the student's strengths is the correct answer to that. Question 14, members of the deaf community. So members of the deaf community use American Sign Language and it's considered the native language, and really do think of themselves as a unique culture, as a minority group similar to ethnic and racial minorities. And you may hear the term deaf culture. Question 15. Students with hearing loss benefit from specially designed assistive technology that includes all the following except, and the answer to that is cable television, speech-to-text translations, a text telephone, and an FM system. An FM system is a system where a teacher wears a microphone and the student will be able to plug in directly through a headset or through their hearing aids to hear the teacher's voice directly. Question 16. The vast majority of children with speech and language impairments are served in regular classrooms. Question 17. The process of a manifestation determination. That is when a student is suspended or removed from school for a total combination of 10 days or more, or it looks like they're approaching 10 days or more. And what that does is it protects the student with emotional difficulties from being unfairly disciplined. That manifestation determination has to review whether whatever the infraction was that caused that suspension or expulsion was as a result of their disability, and if it was, it will be handled differently. Question 18. Stuttering or disfluency is a communication disorder that in and of itself does not qualify for IDEA unless it has a significant impact on the student's educational performance. And that can be academically, that can fall into that social and emotional area, it can be both. But if it's not impacting their education, then it does not qualify as a disability. Question 19. The most chronic illness among young children is, in fact, asthma. The two major groups of physical disabilities include neuromotor impairments and musculoskeletal conditions. Those are all of the multiple choice questions from Exam 1. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I hope that going over those multiple choice questions was helpful for you. Thanks.